Well, hey everyone, welcome to episode 3 of O.P.P. No intro music or sound bites this week or probably ever again, just because I realized last thing I want to do is have to re-record something because someone got mad at me for using 8 seconds of their song. So by now you probably know the routine. I basically record and ramble as I go through post-production edit, and this week's submission comes by way of Reddit, and it was submitted by the user Son of Fire. As you can see, it's a nice little intimate moment at a wedding, and so let's jump right in. Okay, so first off, I'm going to set my calibration. Uh, Portrait looks nice. It's kind of bright. Let's see what else we have. Kind of like Vivid. Gives a little bit more punch. Eh. Eh. Alright, so let's go with Vivid. Let's try that out. Alright, so let's see a little bit of you. Definitely bring in some of those shadows. Let's see. Nice, kind of opened it up. Alright. Nice and warm. Since it's a nice private moment, you want to add a little warmth. You definitely don't want it cold and dark. So you want to convey some of the warmth. I don't like that shadow, so I'm going to skip ahead real quick and open up that shadow a little bit. Let's get you. Let's turn you off. There we go, and just kind of open that up. Much better. Alright, so we've got the tone curve set. So the contrast and the brightness are nice and fixed. We've got our camera calibration. So let's go in. Let's open up some of those shadows some more, and then bring back some general darkness. Likewise, let's bump up the saturation of the scene. Let's bring that down. So lowering the vibrance is a good offset when you up the saturation, because the thing about upping the saturation is while it makes the rest of the scene look really nice and warm and colorful, it tends to give skin tones a little too much of a glow, and dropping the vibrance often helps compensate for that. Alright, so let's look at the scene in general. Let's bring those whites up right over here. Just bring a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so we want to brighten the scene. We don't want it too bright because we don't want to blow it out. The nice thing about this image is that it's this intimate, private little aside. And I love the little use, how you can see the ring and everything. And so we don't want to make it too bright and glaring where it's just kind of like, hey, look at this intimate moment. But we don't want it too dark where it just kind of blah. One thing I like to do if I'm doing post-processing on a wedding photo, I will often crop it to a more standard size, because odds are that something I retouch is going to be one of the nicer images, probably going to get printed. And while more and more printers are offering non-standard sizes, you've still got all of these wedding albums and frames and all these different things that kind of expect you to have a more standard size. So I'll usually go, sometimes I'll go 8 by 10. I prefer 8.5 by 11 because it gives me a little bit more of the width. Alright, so let's see. So that's looking pretty good. That's all nice. This is my own little personal touch that I like to throw on. It can be a bit of a cheap ploy if it's overused. It's basically like a folk a faux cross process. And what I do is I start it out big so that I can see how the colors look and how they interact with the colors that are in the scene, and then I dial it down way down. And this is just my personal thing. And basically what I like to do is have enough that if you're comparing the before and after, you can see a difference, especially in the skin. The skin takes on this kind of nostalgic tone to it. And so I like to keep it nice and simple. Alright, so let's get the detail going. Let's bring out some of that sharpness. I usually start at around 60. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so you can especially see it in the hair. On, off. Takes a second for it to refresh. Back on. Alright, the thing is, you know, upping the sharpening, bringing out more detail also brings out more noise. So let us bring that up just a smidge. And let's see how that looks. Alright, better. Sharper, but not too noisy. Alright, actually, while we're in here, let us give just a little bit of skin softening. Just to kind of smooth that out. Let's see. There, nice and subtle. Alright. Alright, so I like the detail. I might sharpen some areas individually, but for the overall, I think the detail is good. I'm not going to do the vignetting. That I'm going to do in Photoshop because I want the vignetting to be very subtle and I want it to be very specific. So one last thing is I'm going to go in, and this was actually pointed out on Reddit as well by a user whose name Ayn MF. I don't know how to pronounce that. But one thing he pointed out was, especially, and you'll see this a lot in wedding pictures because you have a lot of repeating patterns, but you have what's known as moire, and that's what you get if you have a repeating pattern, and I don't know the science behind it, but it creates this funky little reflection discoloration. You see it here in the watch. You can see it here. Oops. God. There we go. You can see it here in the veil, and you can see it right over here in the veil. So luckily, thankfully, and very, very timely, Photoshop added Adobe added moire control in Lightroom right there. So let me get a new brush, reset you, and just bump up the moire. So before I play with the moire, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the areas, and then I'm going to move the slider because I don't really know what setting I want to use. So let's hit O to turn on the masked overlay, turn off auto mask for this case, and just kind of paint it there. So I'm just going to paint all three areas because odds are I'll be using the same fix on them anyway. All right. When you see funky lines in a pattern defined, that's a moire. Alright. Oh, wait, no, got some over here. You don't want to get too crazy. I mean, you know, you don't really need to scrutinize every last bit. But if you've got something that's pretty veil heavy, see, and you can actually kind of see the lines already. So I might just do the whole thing and see how that looks. Alright. So we've painted the areas. Let's paint that one too. Okay, now we're going to use the watch as our sort of guide stick because that's got the most obvious moire patterning. So let's slide you, and you can see it starting to fade. Okay, hold on, I gotta make up for the delay. One thing that fixing moire does is it can desaturate the image a little bit, so you don't want to go too crazy. So for example, if 30 will work, you don't want to go up to 90. So let's see, 20. Okay, so that's 0. That's 10. That's 20, and maybe 30. Okay, so you can see the difference. No fix and with fix. Come on, go away. There we go. Alright, so now let's see the other areas. Okay, so that looks a little bit clean. So you can already see some of the desaturation kind of happening, which is why you don't want to go too crazy. Okay, so it's not bad over here. Let's try it on and off. So that's with the moire fix off. You can see all these little lines and patterns, and when you turn it on, it goes away. Alright, so now that we have a moire fix setting that we like, we can then come in and target the areas and just kind of paint them over. Alright, so you're good. Oh. Okay, so let's actually bring you down to maybe 20. And what we can do is we can also pump the saturation up just a touch to compensate. Alright. So we might actually, oh, no, come back, there we go. Let me sharpen that ring. Just a touch. Just to kind of bring it out. Alright. Let's see. So we started with this. Looking pretty nice. It's still a little bit on the darker side. So let's bring you up just a hair. Actually, that's good. Okay, so one more thing I'm going to do before we take it into Photoshop is I'm going to create a little bit of a vignette help. And what I'm going to do is, so I like the bokeh that's going on in the background, but I want to blur it just a touch more, just for my own personal shits and giggles. So I'm going to grab the graduated filter. And what a graduated filter does is it applies an effect and then it kind of blurs it out with a gradient. So let's say, for example, if I had done that. So you can see how it gets really dark here and then it fades out over there. So we're going to use this and we are going to bring the sharpness down on the background as well as some of the clarity. Not too much on the clarity side. We can up the saturation and maybe take out some of that. So we can brighten it a bit. And basically I just want to kind of soften it. And let's see how that looks. Okay. Looking pretty nice. Actually, before I take it into Photoshop, one thing I like to do is bring out, so bridal gowns have such great detail in them. Like, look at that pattern. That is an awesome pattern. And they spend all this money on these great dresses with great patterns, and a lot of times it's lost in the photographs. So I like to just kind of take a clarity brush and just paint over the dress. And so in this case, I'm gonna do the overlay. I generally prefer to start with an overlay and then season the adjustment to taste. Pick where and then decide what. Alright, so let's get that. I am going to do, so there's detail here behind the veil, and there's also this over here and this up top. So, come on, no, there we go. Okay, so these two, the bride's back, oh, let me just clean this up real quick. Okay, so I'm going to do these two first, and then I'll do this separate because you can see it's already darker than this. So if I apply the same amount of clarity, then this is going to get super dark, and I don't want that. So, okay, let me zoom in, and I'm going to use this as the gauge. And let's try 65. Without, with. Nice. Okay, so let's add a little bit of sharpness. There we go. Let's see. Okay, like that. Alright, and I like that. Okay. And then we are going to make a new clarity brush. And we're going to paint this. Why is my flow at 8%? There we go. Okay. Alright. So 40. See, now if we'd taken this up to 60 and 20 sharpness, that would have been way too strong. So 40 is good. There we go. And we'll keep the sharpness. Alright. Let's take a look one more. There you go. Really bring out the detail in the thing. We'll leave the hair as is. It's kind of hidden behind a veil, so you know there's no need to make it sharp. You don't want to go too crazy. Alright, and now that we are good with all of this, let us take this puppy into Photoshop. Okay, so we're in Photoshop, and really, I mean, we've done pretty much everything that, you know, I want to do in Lightroom. So all I'm going to do with this is create a nice little vignette. Now, this especially more than, you know, an image like this, I definitely want to control the vignette. So I don't want one of those catch-all vignettes where it just darkens the corners. So I want to make it brush opacity. Okay. So I want to make it all about these two. And then I will lower the brush. I will drop my opacity to 20, and I'll just kind of feather the edges. Then once I'm happy with how it's feathered, let's drop the layer opacity. Let's see, that's 100, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I'd say 25. Yeah, nice and simple. And actually, while I'm in here looking at it now, I find this bit very distracting, especially if I'm looking here and then my eye keeps going over there. Like this thing over here, that's okay. It's far enough out of the way that even though it's bright-ish, it's far enough. But this is just, that's like the third wheel, and nobody wants that. So I'm going to Alt double click to make my background an editable, a non-background layer. I'm going to group these guys, copy the group, merge the group, and then that way I still have my originals. I'm going to get my good friend Mr. Content Aware. I'm just going to lasso you right there. Find a bit of the tree that, or whatever the hell that is that matches, and voila! So now you see it, now you don't. Nice and simple. I think that's about it. So I will save and back into Lightroom. And so here's what we got. Started with this, ended with this. So I guess that about wraps it up for this week. I will see you guys next Sunday.